He was found face down on his bathroom floor. His future wife was just 14 years old when they met, while he was a 24-year-old global superstar. His own bodyguards wrote a tell-all book exposing his deepest secrets just weeks before his death. The man managing his career wasn't who he claimed to be and took an unprecedented 50% cut. Early TV appearances showed him only from the waist up because his dancing was considered too scandalous. By the end, his dramatic physical transformation shocked fans around the world. Number 6. When his moves were too hot for TV. Before Elvis Presley became the undisputed king of rock and roll, he was a lightning rod for controversy, and it all started with the way he moved. Picture this. It's the mid-1950s, a time of buttoned-up collars and societal conservatism. Then comes this young man from Tupelo, Mississippi, with slicked-back hair, a rebellious sneer, and hips that seemed to have a mind of their own. When Elvis burst onto the national scene, his performances were unlike anything mainstream America had ever witnessed. He gyrated, he swiveled, he shook his legs, movements borrowed heavily from the black rhythm and blues artists he admired, but delivered with a raw, untamed energy that sent teenagers into hysterics and their parents into a moral panic. His early appearances on television became legendary battlegrounds. On Milton Berle's show in 1956, his performance of Hound Dog, complete with suggestive bumps and grinds, caused an absolute uproar. Critics lambasted him, calling his act vulgar and animalistic. Religious leaders denounced him from pulpits, warning that his music and movements were corrupting the youth. Parent groups organized protests, demanding he be banned from the airwaves. The media latched onto the controversy, dubbing him Elvis the Pelvis. It was a nickname intended as an insult, a way to reduce his talent to mere sexual provocation, but it ironically cemented his image as a dangerous, irresistible rebel. The pressure mounted. When Elvis was booked for the prestigious Ed Sullivan Show, a program known for its family-friendly entertainment, the stakes were incredibly high. Sullivan, initially hesitant to even book Presley due to the controversy, eventually relented, recognizing the singer's massive popularity. However, concessions had to be made. For his first appearance in September 1956, Elvis was famously filmed only from the waist up during certain songs, particularly during his performance of Ready Teddy and parts of Hound Dog. The network censors, terrified of offending viewers, literally cut off the source of the scandal, his gyrating hips. This act of censorship, meant to tame the Elvis phenomenon, only added fuel to the fire. It highlighted just how powerful and threatening his stage presence was perceived to be. It made him seem even more forbidden, more exciting to his young fans, while confirming the worst fears of his detractors. This early scandal wasn't just about dance moves. It was about a cultural clash, a generational divide, and the seismic shift Elvis represented in music, sexuality, and American society. His body, his movements, became a symbol of rebellion, challenging the status quo and forcing a national conversation about decency, race, and the power of rock and roll. The image of Elvis being censored on national television became iconic, a defining moment where the establishment tried and arguably failed to contain the raw energy that would soon conquer the world. Number 5. The man who pulled the strings may be too tight. Behind the meteoric rise and sustained superstardom of Elvis Presley stood a figure as enigmatic and controversial as the king himself, Colonel Tom Parker. Parker wasn't actually a colonel, nor was his name Tom Parker. Born Andreas Cornelis van Kuijek in the Netherlands, he entered the United States illegally and shrouded his past in mystery. He attached himself to Elvis early on, recognizing the raw talent and potential for immense profit. He became Elvis's exclusive manager in 1956, negotiating a contract that was virtually unheard of in the music industry. Parker was entitled to a staggering 25% of Elvis's gross earnings, a figure that would later reportedly balloon to an unbelievable 50% in some instances. This level of control and financial stake was extraordinary, raising eyebrows even then. Parker's management style was one of absolute control. He dictated nearly every aspect of Elvis's career, often prioritizing profit over artistic development. After Elvis returned from his stint in the Army, Parker steered him away from the rebellious rock and roll that made him famous and pushed him into a relentless stream of formulaic Hollywood movies. While initially lucrative, these films often featured weak scripts and mediocre songs, gradually eroding Elvis's musical credibility. Throughout the 1960s, fans longed for the raw energy of his early days, but Parker kept him locked into movie contracts that offered guaranteed paydays. Critics lamented the squandering of his talent, unforgettable B-movies. One of the most significant points of contention, and a source of enduring scandal, was Parker's adamant refusal to let Elvis tour internationally. Despite enormous demand from fans across Europe, Asia, and South America, Elvis never performed a concert outside North America, save for a few early shows in Canada. Why? Theories abound, but the most persistent explanation centers on Parker's undocumented status. As an illegal immigrant traveling abroad and then attempting to re-enter the U.S., would have exposed his secret and potentially led to deportation. Parker's personal predicament effectively trapped the world's biggest star within the borders of the United States. This decision denied Elvis the opportunity to connect with his global fan base and arguably limited the scope of his cultural impact during his lifetime. It was a decision driven not by Elvis's best interests, but by his manager's precarious legal situation. Furthermore, Parker's infamous gambling habits became a subject of concern, particularly in Elvis's later years during his Las Vegas residencies. Reports surfaced that Parker incurred massive gambling debts at the casinos where Elvis performed, leading some to speculate that Parker kept Elvis working grueling schedules in Vegas, partly to pay off these debts. The relationship was complex. Elvis often referred to Parker with affection, but members of Elvis's inner circle, the Memphis Mafia, would later describe Parker's iron grip as stifling and exploitative. They painted a picture of a manager who isolated Elvis, controlled his access to information, and prioritized lucrative deals over the singer's artistic or personal well-being. The scandal surrounding Colonel Tom Parker isn't just about questionable business practices. It's about the immense power one man wielded over a cultural icon, the secrets he kept, and the ways his decisions may have profoundly and perhaps negatively shaped the king's career. The full extent of Parker's financial dealings and control remains debated, but the narrative of a potentially exploitative relationship cast a shadow over Elvis's phenomenal success. Number 4. When his inner circle spilled ALL, the tea. For decades, Elvis Presley was protected by a loyal group of friends, family, and employees known as the Memphis Mafia. They were his companions, his bodyguards, his confidants. They traveled with him, lived with him, and fiercely guarded his privacy, helping maintain the carefully crafted public image of the king. That protective wall crumbled spectacularly in July 1977 with the publication of a book titled Elvis, What Happened? authored by 3 former bodyguards, Red West, Sonny West, Red's cousin, and Dave Hebler, along with journalist Steve Dunleavy. The book was an explosive, tell-all expose that ripped the veil off Elvis's private life. The timing couldn't have been more dramatic. Released just weeks before Elvis's untimely death, the book hit the shelves while the king was still performing, albeit erratically. The authors, who had been fired by Elvis's father, Vernon Presley, the previous year, reportedly as a cost-cutting measure, though they felt unjustly dismissed, decided to reveal the side of Elvis the public never saw. The revelations were shocking and deeply damaging to his image. The book detailed Elvis's escalating prescription drug abuse, painting a picture not of recreational use, but of heavy dependency. It described erratic behavior, violent mood swings, and a growing paranoia. Accounts of Elvis shooting out television sets in fits of anger, ordering expensive cars on whims only to destroy them later, and engaging in bizarre late-night monologues were laid bare. Elvis, What Happened, also delved into the king's complicated relationships with women, confirming long, swirling rumors of numerous affairs throughout his marriage to Priscilla and beyond. It depicted a man increasingly isolated within the opulent confines of Graceland, surrounded by enablers, but starved of genuine connection. The bodyguards described their role, often extending beyond security to procuring medications, managing his outbursts, and keeping his secrets hidden from the public and even from some family members. The book portrayed Elvis not as the confident, modest performer seen on stage, but as a troubled, declining man struggling with addiction, loneliness, and the crushing weight of his own fame. The publication sent shockwaves through Elvis's fan base and the media. While some dismissed it as the vengeful ramblings of disgruntled ex-employees seeking a prey day, many others saw it as a credible, albeit heartbreaking glimpse behind the curtain. It forced a public confrontation with the darker aspects of Elvis's life, aspects that had been rumored for years, but never confirmed by those closest to him. For fans who idolized Elvis as a near mythical figure, the book was devastating. It humanized him in the most unflattering ways, revealing vulnerabilities and flaws that shattered the carefully maintained illusion. Elvis himself was reportedly deeply hurt and angered by the book's publication. He felt betrayed by men he considered friends, men who had been part of his inner sanctum for years. The scandal wasn't just the content of the book itself, but the act of betrayal by those who were once sworn to protect him. While the authors maintained they wrote the book partly out of a desperate hope that exposing his problems would force Elvis to seek help, its publication irrevocably tarnished his image in the final weeks of his life. When Elvis died shortly after its release, the book gained even more notoriety, seen by many as a tragic confirmation of the secrets it had revealed. It marked a turning point in how Elvis was perceived, opening the door for a more critical and complex understanding of the man behind the legend. Number 3. The shocking Transylvanian nobody wanted to see. Elvis Presley, in his prime, was the epitome of youthful energy and sex appeal. The lean, smoldering rock and roller of the 1950s morphed into the sleek, black, leather-clad comeback king of 1968. He was magnetic, and seemingly defied aging. However, the final years of his life presented a starkly different picture, a physical transformation that shocked and saddened fans worldwide and became a scandal in its own right, the era often cruelly dubbed Fat Elvis. Starting in the early 1970s, particularly during his grueling Las Vegas residencies and demanding tour schedules, Elvis's physical appearance began to change dramatically. The once trim physique gave way to significant weight gain. His famously handsome face became puffy and bloated. He developed unhealthy eating habits, reportedly indulging in high-calorie, high-fat foods like the infamous fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches. This weight gain was often hidden initially beneath the increasingly elaborate custom-made jumpsuits that became his stage trademark. These caped wonders, while visually spectacular, also served to camouflage his expanding girth. But the changes weren't just cosmetic. Elvis's health was clearly deteriorating. His performances, once electrifying, became erratic. On stage, he sometimes appeared lethargic, slurring his words, forgetting lyrics, or relying heavily on scarves and water breaks. His movements became labored, lacking the explosive energy of his youth. There were reports of him falling asleep between songs or needing assistance to navigate the stage. Concerts were sometimes cut short, and tour dates were increasingly canceled due to various health issues, often vaguely attributed to fatigue or intestinal flu. The media, once focused on his hip swivels, now began commenting on his weight and apparent ill health. Unflattering photos became commonplace. Tabloids ran headlines speculating about his condition. This visible decline was scandalous, precisely because it contrasted so sharply with the iconographic image of Elvis as the eternally youthful, virile king. It was a public deterioration that fans and critics alike found difficult to watch. The man who had once symbolized rebellion and vitality now seemed like a casualty of his own lifestyle and fame. Rumors swirled about the reasons behind his transformation. While poor diet and lack of exercise played a part, many pointed to the underlying issue of his escalating prescription drug abuse. The various medications he was taking, painkillers, sedatives, stimulants, likely contributed significantly to his weight fluctuations, water retention, lethargy, and overall poor health. His body was bearing the visible toll of years of substance dependency and punishing work schedules. The scandal wasn't simply that he gained weight. It was the undeniable visual evidence of his declining health, the apparent lack of care he was receiving or seeking, and the tragic trajectory it suggested. It raised uncomfortable questions about the pressures of fame, the role of his handlers, and the state of his well-being. The image of the overweight, often unwell Elvis in the rhinestone jumpsuit became a poignant and troubling symbol of his final years, a stark reminder of the human frailty behind the legendary facade. It was a transformation that fans didn't want to see, a visible manifestation of the troubles that were consuming him offstage. Number 2. The teenager he met while stationed overseas. One of the most enduring and debated aspects of Elvis Presley's personal life centers on his relationship with Priscilla, specifically the circumstances under which they met and began their courtship. It's a story that, even during their marriage, raised eyebrows and continues to be viewed through a lens of scandal and controversy due to the significant age difference and Priscilla's youth at the time. In 1959, Elvis Presley was arguably the biggest star on the planet, but he was also Sergeant Presley, serving his mandatory military duty in West Germany. At a party off base, the 24-year-old global icon was introduced to Priscilla. She was the stepdaughter of a U.S. Air Force captain, stationed there. She was also just 14 years old. Despite the decade-long age gap and her status as a minor, Elvis was immediately smitten, and the two began spending a significant amount of time together. By all accounts, including Priscilla's own, Elvis was respectful during their initial courtship in Germany, often treating her more like a confidant or a younger sister figure he could mold. He spoke to her about his life, his fears, and his late mother Gladys. The controversial aspect intensified when Elvis's military service ended in 1960 and he returned to the United States. He clearly hadn't forgotten Priscilla. After persistent communication and convincing her parents, Elvis arranged for Priscilla, still a teenager, to visit him in Los Angeles in 1962. Later that same year, a more permanent arrangement was made. Priscilla moved from Germany to Memphis to live near Graceland, initially staying with Elvis's father and stepmother. The plan agreed upon by her parents was for her to finish her high school education at a local Catholic girls' school, Immaculate Conception High School, while continuing her relationship with Elvis under close supervision. She was still only 17 years old when she effectively moved in to be near the world's most famous entertainer, who was then 27. This arrangement was highly unusual and carefully managed to avoid public scandal at the time. Elvis's team worked hard to present the relationship in a wholesome light, emphasizing the parental consent and the focus on Priscilla completing her education. However, the reality of a teenage girl living under the guardianship of and being romantically involved with a superstar who was 10 years her senior was inherently problematic and generated significant gossip and scrutiny behind closed doors. While presented as a fairy tale romance to the public, the power dynamics and the age difference were undeniable. They eventually married in Las Vegas in May 1967. Priscilla had just turned 21 a few weeks prior. Their daughter, Lisa Marie, was born exactly 9 months later. While the marriage itself seemed to legitimize the relationship in the eyes of many, the origins of their courtship, a 24-year-old man beginning a relationship with a 14-year-old girl, remained a foundation element that couldn't be entirely erased or normalized, especially by later societal standards. Even after their divorce in 1973, the story of their meeting continued to be a point of fascination and controversy. Priscilla herself has spoken and written about this period, describing Elvis's control over her appearance and life, aiming to shape her into his ideal woman. The scandal lies not necessarily in illegality given the context and consent involved, but in the ethical questions surrounding the relationship dynamics, the significant age gap, and the vulnerability of a young teenager involved with a powerful older celebrity. It remains a complex and often uncomfortable part of the Elvis Presley narrative. Number 1. The final days and the secrets found in his bathroom. The death of Elvis Presley on August 16, 1977, was not just a tragedy. It was a seismic cultural event shrouded in scandal, speculation, and deeply unsettling revelation. The king of rock and roll, a man who seemed larger than life, was found dead at the age of 42. The circumstances of his death and the information that emerged afterward irrevocably shattered the myth and exposed the grim reality of his final years. Elvis was discovered unresponsive, face down on the floor of his luxurious bathroom suite at Graceland, by his then-girlfriend, Ginger Alden. Attempts to revive him were unsuccessful, and he was pronounced dead at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. The initial shock gave way almost immediately to questions and confusion. The official cause of death announced shortly afterward was cardiac arrhythmia, essentially heart failure. While Elvis was known to have various health problems, including high blood pressure, an enlarged colon, and the aforementioned weight issues, this explanation seemed too simple, too neat, for many, especially given the rumors that had been swirling for years and the recent publication of the Elvis What Happened book. The real scandal began to unfold as details about the autopsy and the contents of Elvis's system emerged. Toxicology reports, initially suppressed but later revealed through investigations and leaks, painted a horrifying picture of polypharmacy, the simultaneous use of multiple drugs. Traces of numerous potent prescription medications were found in his body, including powerful opiates like Dilaudid, Percodan, Demerol, and Codeine, as well as sedatives and tranquilizers such as Valium, Quaaludes, and sleeping pills. While none of the drugs were technically illegal, they had all been prescribed. The sheer quantity and combination were staggering and lethal. Reports indicated that, at the time of his death, his system contained levels of several drugs far exceeding therapeutic doses. This revelation confirmed the worst fears and the most damning allegations from the tell-all book. Elvis wasn't just using prescription drugs, he was heavily addicted, consuming a dangerous cocktail of medications on a daily basis. The focus then shifted to how he obtained such vast quantities of controlled substances. Attention turned to his personal physician, Dr. George Nichopoulos, affectionately known as Dr. Nick. Investigations revealed that in the last couple of years of Elvis's life alone, Dr. Nick had prescribed thousands upon thousands of doses of various pills for Elvis. While Dr. Nick maintained he was trying to manage Elvis's complex health issues and control his intake by administering the drugs himself or prescribing placebos, the sheer volume of prescriptions was indefensible to many. Dr. Nick faced medical board reviews and eventually criminal charges related to his prescribing practices for Elvis and other patients, although he was ultimately acquitted of criminal liability in Elvis's death. However, his medical license was temporarily suspended and later permanently revoked for overprescription. The circumstances surrounding his death, found alone in his bathroom, the shocking state of his health revealed by the autopsy, the confirmation of massive prescription drug abuse, and the questionable practices of his physician created a perfect storm of scandal. It wasn't just that the king was dead, it was how he died. It suggested a life spiraling out of control, enabled by those around him, hidden behind the gates of Graceland. The image of the vibrant young rebel was completely eclipsed by the tragic reality of a middle-aged man ravaged by addiction and poor health. The official cause of death remains debated by some pathologists and researchers even today, with some arguing the primary cause was indeed his multiple health ailments exacerbated by drug use, while others insist the drug toxicity itself was the direct killer. Regardless, the scandalous facts surrounding his final days and the pharmaceutical secrets discovered after his death exposed the profound darkness behind the dazzling spotlight, forever changing the way the world remembered Elvis Presley